Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is Tuesday morning, March the 15th, 6 o'clock here in the morning. Glad to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And the chat room is open. I haven't popped the link in there yet. But we're talking about the article from Midrashim, the Spiritual Institute. And it is to do with dysfunctional families. And we're working on a section regarding boundaries. It's quite interesting. I know Saturday we left off about halfway through the article. It's quite a large article on dysfunctional families and whatnot. That's a really interesting website, and I really like the information that they have there, especially regarding adult survivor issues. And you know, even if a person grew up in a dysfunctional home and there wasn't any abuse, it can still be very hard to function, you know, as an adult. You know what I mean? To go back and sort of redo or relearn things that we have missed out on as children that we, you know, that can really help us, you know, in our adult lives. So that's why I find this stuff very helpful for myself. Hopefully, it's helping somebody else out as well. So thanks everybody for tuning in. You know, I appreciate everybody who's listening to the shows and catching the archives and whatnot. Like, I think I've done over 600 shows now, and it's been a year and a half since I've been on Blog Talk Radio, and thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate it. You know, I had no idea how many people would be listening to the show, so it's actually made it worthwhile to do the show, to have people tune in and listen. So thanks very much. I'm not a counselor or therapist. I'm just a private person paying to do my own Blog Talk shows. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and an author, and I work full time, and I'm really busy. But I wanted to do these shows because I wanted to break the silence. I really wanted to be one more voice out here, just to add to all the other voices out here speaking out against abuse and standing up for first of all child rights, and to speak about abuse, because it's always pushed under the carpet. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to hear about it. And if we don't change that, it'll never change. The silence is one of the, I think, really the issue. That's why there's a lack of education regarding child abuse and child abuse prevention. That's why there's a lack of information for survivors, for adult survivors of child abuse who are suffering from the aftermath of being abused. And I think silence is the issue, and that's why I decided, I thought, you know, about 4 years ago is when I started my healing journey, but I've done the better part of it the last 2 years. And so I thought, well, I want to talk publicly about this. I want people to know, you know, what these children are going through out here, and I just want to be one more voice for survivors as well, right? So that's why I'm doing this show. This show is really my healing journey, one child abuse survivor to another, and I'm always looking for information and researching and doing a whole lot of self-help, and you know, it is helpful for me to kind of run through this stuff. And I know there's other people out there who, you know, may not have anybody to talk to and may not have the validation or anybody to validate the abuse. It's very important to get help. You know, whether you if you're having a hard time and you're struggling, you're just feeling like, you know, you can't cope and whatnot, you make sure that you reach out and get some help. You know, whether it's a counselor or a therapist, or if you have to, you call a crisis line, like whatever you have to do. But you certainly deserve to have a good life. And I've met some people that have been so down and out and suicidal in my lifetime, and you know, I've been suicidal in my lifetime. Never attempted it, but always was thinking about it. And because my brother killed himself, and my mother, right, my mom and dad were suicidal, so it was an option for us. We all grew up in this home where suicide and death was always an option. So I've had to go back and, you know, in the last 4 years and really try to change all of those negative behaviors that were affecting my life, right, from the abuse that I suffered, which wasn't even my fault. So that's why I'm doing this show, you know, for just to be a voice out here for people, you know, who may be experiencing this stuff and not have anybody to talk to, or even to think about it with, you know what I mean? So I hope that everybody's getting something out of it. So thanks for tuning in. You know, you have to listen at your own discretion, because I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a very sensitive subject, and a lot of people may find it very uncomfortable to listen to. So you have to ultimately know what's good for you to listen to. So you have to think about it first. You know, is the topic of abuse going to bother me? And, you know, will it cause me to be depressed or down, or, you know, whatever? And if it's going to do that, then you don't want to listen, right? So you need to know what's good for you to listen to. And then if the show might bother you, if the topics of abuse bother you, then you need to turn it off, right? It's very important that you listen at your own discretion. And young people under the age of 18, you need to have someone approve it that you can listen to the show, get a permission to listen to my shows, mainly because there's a lot of adult content on my shows, and I care about children, and I think children should be protected at all times. And abuse is, like I was saying, abuse is a sensitive subject. So, young people under the age of 18, if you haven't heard a whole lot about abuse, these topics could be kind of scarier. They might bother you. So you need to have an adult listen to the show with you to make sure that it's something that you should be listening to age appropriately, right? So thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll get right into this topic here. We're still on this very interesting website here. This is I'll give you the actual title, Mudrashram. It's from www.mudrashram.com, MUDRASHRAM, mudrashram.com, and it's I'll give you the website. It's Mudrashram Institute of Spiritual Studies. When you grow up in a dysfunctional family is the name of this actual webpage. This was written by George A. Boyd in 1992, but this information is really quite interesting, and I've actually talking about the different roles that people might take on growing up in a dysfunctional family. Different roles that children might be kind of forced to play, or that they might take on themselves because of what's going on in the home. Talking about types of dysfunctional families, and this really interesting article. I think that George A. Boyd's done a great job here of presenting dysfunctional families, and then they go on to talk about healthy families versus unhealthy families, and we covered all that. It's about halfway through the article here, maybe a little bit more than halfway now. But boundaries are a huge issue, and so that's what we're talking about, is boundaries. We left off on Saturday just talking about a couple of the boundaries. They said none of this is easy, but the experience of numerous people who have survived growing up in these families and have embarked upon a program of recovery let us know that it is possible to regain their sanity and peace of mind despite their painful and abusive past. So this is what George A. Boyd is writing here. And he says, we also know that if an adult who grew up in these types of families does not address these powerful and poignant issues, it is likely that he or she will unwittingly continue these patterns of abuse into a new generation. So, excuse me, my voice is just terrible this morning. It was yesterday too. And I think it's just because I'm tired. That's why I'm taking a break on my shows. Actually, I'm down to Tuesdays and Thursdays for now, in the mornings and evenings, just to take a break. I have some guests here. I have some good friends here in the chat room. Thanks for being here with me. I appreciate it. Good morning to you too, Storm Chaser. And this is really, that's why I'm doing these shows, because just like George A. Boyd here says, that people told, him that even though it's not easy, the number of people who have survived growing up in these types of families are, have reported that it is possible to regain their sanity and peace of mind, despite their painful and abusive past. And I think that's the whole issue. I see that's what kind of got me through, was just looking at other survivors out here who had been through what I consider to be so much worse abuse than I had suffered. You know what I mean? Like I like, I do read other people's stories of their past, because it's validation for me, to read another survivor's story. And I believe their story is worth reading, because it's their life, it's their whole entire being just placed out for the world to see. And I think that we owe them that respect, So it's and also because of if you've been through some of this stuff, it's kind of like validating for you. It's like, oh, I've been there. I understand that. I've been through that, or whatever. And some of it, of course, I don't relate to, but some of it I did. So these people are out here saying, no, you can do it. You can do it. They're out there encouraging people. There's so many, I don't even want to start naming them. You know what I mean? But I mean, quite a few of them have been on my show. Lindsay Tolson, Ray Luskin, they're all survivors of child abuse, all the different types of child abuse and sexual abuse. And I have so many friends, which I won't name on the air here, but those two ladies specifically have been on my shows. And, John Schmidt, he's a good friend of mine as well. And there's so many. There's just Kate Swift out of England, Angela Shelton. You just start naming them off. I could probably list 100 right now of people who influence me on a daily basis to keep going and to remember that we can have a good life, and we can learn to love ourselves, and we can learn to go back and undo we might not ever be able to completely undo all this stuff. I don't know, what I mean? I'd like to think it's possible, but for everybody, everyone's different. You know what I mean? I even think for myself, can I completely, heal from this abuse that I suffered as a child, right? And just what it did to me as a person on this planet. Because in the back of my mind, I know the relationship that I had with my parents. I know the relationship that that we all had together as a family, and it was completely unhealthy, and completely twisted, and painful and hurtful, and it's, you can't go back and get that. That's what I quite often mention that on my shows, because it's like you can't go back. I can't go back and change the past. The past is the past. It's done. It's done deal. So I thought, well, that's the only thing I can do, which I read in some very awesome self-help type, information out there. One being Survivor to Thriver manual from the Adult Survivors of Child Abuse, the ASCA. They have a great it's Adult Survivor workbook, and it's called Survivor to Thriver. And that workbook's awesome. So just reading through some of this information, thinking, well, okay, I can't change the past, but what I can do is I can change the way I feel about myself now, and I can change the way I feel about life now. And so I started to realize that I got to start living in the now. You know what I mean? Like, I got to start allowing myself to be present here in the present, right? Because my whole life up until 40 years old, until about the age of 40, 41, I was living in the present, but I was just a shell. And my whole thought processes in my mind and the pain inside my heart was all from a long, long time ago. So I thought, how can I connect? I got to be able to connect to this life. I got to be able to connect to the reality of the now, and I got to be able to be happy with it and okay with it. You know what I mean? Because I'm just wasting my life by allowing this abuse that I suffered as a child to rule the day. And so I thought, I got to start changing the way I feel about things and allow myself to heal and allow myself to feel differently. And that's what I started doing 4 years ago. And it's been a long haul for sure. Because I'm on my own. You know what I mean? But I have a lot of, I don't want to say I'm completely on my own. I have a lot of support from a lot of people. But the thing is in my daily life, I'm on my own. Like, I have nobody here. There's nobody in any room with me sitting there saying, you can do it. There's nobody sitting on the same couch with me saying, you can do it. You know what I mean? So these people, thank God for these people in my life. I'm so thankful to have the people that I have in my life, whether they're a million miles away or not. They're with me every day. So that's very important to me, and it has been a great support. But it is a long haul for a lot of survivors. But I chose self-help just because of the issues that I've never trusted anybody really, especially a counselor or a therapist. I just grew up to be told that they would hurt us, and so I still have a problem with that. But I have talked to some counselors and therapists actually just in the last year or so, and they have actually been very nice and supportive of what I'm doing. And I've had a few of them actually talk to me for a while and say, just keep going, you're doing all right. And, if you have to go see someone, then you do, but just keep on your journey. You seem to be all right. So, that's kind of nice, right? But the thing is I had to learn how to allow myself to live in the here and the now, as well as try to get over all of this garbage from the past. It's been hard. But that's what they're saying here. People can do it. And there's too many survivors sitting in front of me saying, you can do it, we've done it, you can do it. So it's very helpful to look to those people who have been through what I consider to be so much worse than I have. And people always say, well, there's no such thing as so much worse. And I've even said it myself, because pain is pain, sorrow is sorrow, suffering is suffering. Lost childhood is a lost childhood, right? Regardless of what happened. But it's still, I sit there and I think, God, what some of these people have gone through. You know what I mean? And then other people say the same thing to me, and I'm like, yeah, but, we've all, if you've been abused, you know what it's all about, right? And so I look to these people in my life because I look up to them and I say, it is worth it. They're surviving and they're moving forward, and their encouragement means something to me, right? So I'm able to say, that's awesome. I want to keep going. Whereas I've had people tell me, well, it must be so easy for you, because you're on that side of it. And it's like, no, it's not easy for me. You know what I mean? Like, every day it's a struggle. And because I fight with a lot of issues within my mind all day, every day, regarding my dad's still living, my family's still dysfunctional. You know what I mean? This kind of stuff is on a daily basis. There's always something that will come up, flashbacks. So it's not easy for me. But I made a commitment and a decision to allow myself to love myself and to live this life and to enjoy this life and not allow the abuse to destroy me, right? So that's my commitment to myself. So it's not easy, but I made a commitment and I'm standing firm on it, you know what I mean? And I think it's so it's a will to survive. It's a will to live and actually do a little bit better than survive and actually thrive, you know. But, I'm not, this is the whole issue, is I'm not completely healed, right? I'm on my healing journey. And so I have good days and I have bad days too, right? But those bad days, they're not nearly as bad as they used to be. And they don't set me back like they used to. And I think it's because I've done a lot of work working through a lot of this stuff. So we can do it, and that's what I like to be, a voice of encouragement for people, George A. Boyd says, we also know that if an adult who grew up in these types of families does not address these powerful and poignant issues, it is likely that he or she will unwittingly continue these patterns of abuse into a new generation. So they talk about that, and, he just goes on to mention a few things here. Good morning, Chris. It's nice to see you here. It says the child who is a victim of incest or molestation may go on to molest or his or her own children. Do I have this link in here? I'm going to pop the link into the chat room so you guys can see this. This is a really interesting website with a lot of really good information on it. I'm going to pop this link into the chat room. This is from Mudrashram Institute of Spiritual Studies. But I just found this information very, very interesting and helpful. So he says, the child who is a victim of incest or molestation may go on to molest his or her own children, right? And that's a possibility, and it does happen. The cycle of abuse, right? That's the issue. But not every person who was abused sexually as a child will go on to abuse their own children sexually or other people's children. That's a fact. But I mean, there's a lot of survivors out there who were sexually abused as children, men and women, who do not abuse children sexually, right? So it's like it's just not it's not a guarantee. It's not a 100% absolute. You know what I mean? Some do, sadly enough. Some take that behavior on as acceptable, and they may even despise themselves for doing it, but they do it anyway. I think a lot of times psychological damage done from being abused as a child, especially sexually, can cause a whole lot of problems with people. And I know that my parents were both abused as children, and they passed on the cycle to us. So I mean, it can happen. But I know lots of survivors who are parents who would never ever intentionally ever hurt their children or sexually use their children ever, because they were abused as children. So they know how harmful and how damaging and how completely horrible that is, and they don't want to treat their own children the way that they were treated, so they go kind of overboard the other way to protect their children and to make sure their children are having a good life, and they would never intentionally hurt their child. So it's not always the case. People who have been abused don't always go on to abuse their own children, but quite a few do, and that's really sad. And that's a cycle of abuse. He said the victim of physical violence may beat or neglect his or her own children. And he's just talking about the cycle of abuse. The child of an alcoholic or drug addict may become chemically addicted, him or herself, at a rate up to 4 times that of the population who did not grow up in these families. So an alcoholic, parents or a parent who is an alcoholic or a substance user, drug addict, the children are 4 times likely to also use alcohol or drugs. Like, my parents were not alcoholics or drug addicts. My mom was on a lot of pills, but she didn't drink. But she was very sick, so she was always on pills. Excuse me. And my dad was one of these people that liked to drink bottles of NyQuil. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. He was schizophrenic, and he had all kinds of problems, and he was always taking big bottles of pills. And I kind of think that's where my brothers got their pill popping thing from, because my dad was always trying to pass us a bunch of pills. Like, he was always trying to give us NyQuil and trying to give us pills, and all the kids. And of course I wouldn't take anything from him because I didn't trust him. I thought he was trying to kill us all the time. Well, he was always threatening to kill us. So when I was a little kid, like 5, 6, 7 years old, I really didn't trust him because he was always threatening our lives and physically abusing people in the home, everybody in the home. So I didn't trust him, and he was always trying to give me NyQuil, and I'd be like, no, I don't want it, and he'd be like, come on, trying to force it down my throat. And I used to wonder about that. I'd be like, why is he trying to give us? Why is he trying to do this? Because he would threaten to kill us in the middle of the night. He'd say, I'm going to kill everybody tonight in their sleep because God would want that. This is the kind of stuff we had to go to bed listening to because we'd be like, oh God, is he going to kill us tonight, or is it going to be tomorrow night, or is it going to be next week? So I slept with a knife. I started sleeping with a knife at the age of 8 years old because I was like, man, I was determined. I was like, man, it's not going to be me, it's going to be him. If anybody goes, man. I was really concerned about my dad killing us because my mom was physically abusing me, but she didn't say she was going to kill me in the middle of the night. If she said she was going to kill me, it was while she was beating me. She'd be like, I'm going to kill you, I'll kill you, beating the crap out of me. But that she didn't threaten to say, okay, tonight I'm going to go in your room and I'm going to kill you, which that's what my dad would say, right? So we were all like, it was pretty psychotic, and it was a nightmare for me as a child. Absolutely, I laugh about it now because I look back at it and I'm thinking, those buggers, I mean, how horrific. Like, how could you possibly do that to your children and think that it's okay? But people do some really sick and twisted things to their children, right? And it's sad, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't sleep well, like, ever, until, especially after I got out of the house and away from them, you know what I mean? I started sleeping a lot better. I tell you that. It's like, oh, man, that's absolutely insane to do to a child, but that's what people do, and it's not right. But my dad was schizophrenic, so he was always, popping bottles of pain pills and medication and whatever he could get his hands on, really. And I think that's where my brothers got that. They were one of my brothers was a pill popper, and he used to overdose all the time, and he died at least once that we know of. Died for like 7 minutes. They brought him back, and he had kind of some issues after that, brain damage and whatnot. And one of my other brothers was a cokehead, and he committed suicide. So absolutely horrific. So that they said that the child of an authoritarian parent may perpetuate the cycle of tyranny, passing on intolerant and repressive values to his or her children. And that's where my mom kind of got her stuff from. My mother was physically abused, and my grandmother was like she was a horrible woman, and she was like, even her husband was afraid of her. That's why it's kind of sad that my grandfather, my mom's dad, would not have straightened the whole thing up and got her to stop abusing her children, because my grandmother actually killed one of her sons. My uncle, he was 17 years old. She horsewhipped him and then made him sleep in the barn, and in the winter, and he got pneumonia and he died. So she was literally responsible for his death. And he was not the oldest. My mom was the oldest, so she saw this, and my mother was always kind of take the brunt of the beatings, because my grandmother was beating on all of her children, including a bunch of orphans. My grandmother, was a horrible woman, and I have nothing good to say about her at all. And that whole thing makes me sick and ill, because she had no remorse for killing her son, none whatsoever. So of course I never got to meet my uncle, right? Because I was not born for many, many years later. But very, very sad, like, people are sick and twisted. So my mother grew up like this. So you would have think that, she used to cry the blues. Well, I was beaten as a child, and I had to save the kids from beating, so I would take all the beatings and the abuse from my mother. And she would cry the blues. She'd be sitting around, crying because she was abused, right? Saying, oh, and my mother murdered my brother, and killed him. He got pneumonia and died, and she'd be feeling sorry for herself and crying the blues about the abuse she suffered, right? And then she would kick the shit out of me, or, beat me with whatever implement she could find, or just trash me with her fists, or trash me with her words, right? Her mouth was horrific, and then sit there and expect me to take it and be okay with it and smile, that's the damage done, you know what I mean? Like, she felt like she knew it was wrong to abuse children, right? And she knew, she was always complaining about the abuse that my dad was inflicting upon my brothers. She'd be like, your father, was abusing the kids, and that's why we got hauled into court, and that's why we had to go to count. That's why I had to beg the judges, and I had to plead the judges to allow you to stay in the home, because she was trying to get me against my dad. See, she was trying to to make me take her side, which I always did anyway because I was trying to avoid the abuse. So, I mean, I always took my mom's side, right? Because I didn't want any more abuse. So I was trying to be always on her good side. And, but not only that, but my mother was being abused by my dad. So I kind of did take her side anyway against my dad, because my dad was a very sick man. And so, I thought, well, here she is. She knows the difference. She knows better. Abuse is wrong. And what does she do? You know what I mean? The same thing her mother did. Maybe not as worse, you know what I mean? But just as bad. I mean, how horrible is that? Like, to pass that cycle on, even knowing how hurtful it is because you've been abused, and then a person will go and abuse their own children and not think anything about it. Like, my mother was murderous, man. You know what I mean? Like, she could have killed me a number of times, and just horrific what people will do to their children and think that it's all right. And then the rest of the family, because of the dysfunction, does not rally around, and that's the sad part. There was, my brothers, when I was really small, my older brothers would actually try to get my parents to stop abusing me, especially. But after they were gone and moved out or dead or whatever, I was just kind of at the mercy there of my parents, and whatever they wanted to do, they were doing. And, there was no protection. And my older sister would not stand up for me because she didn't want to get what I was getting. I kind of don't blame her. I kind of thought about that years later, and I thought, why would my sister not try to protect me? She was in the room quite a bit when mother was beating on me, and she would sit there and just pretend it wasn't happening. You know what I mean? And a friend of mine actually who works with abused adult survivors, she said that she was probably maybe so afraid, you know what I mean, and so freaked out about watching this that she just froze, or she just didn't want to have that happen to her. Because my mother, like, if my sister would have stepped in, my mother would have probably beat on her too. Like, my mother was not the type to be all, oh, okay, I'll stop what I'm doing. I mean, you know what I mean? If she was in the middle of beating me, she was going to do it. That's all there was to it. My brother had to grab a belt out of her hand one time because my mother almost broke my nose, and I couldn't, there was bleeding profusely. And, blood was all over the house. Like, it was all over my bedroom. And, I mean, it was ridiculous. It was an absolutely horrific beating. And then here comes my mother to beat me with a belt. Like, she was going to kill me. And she said she was. I'll kill you. She was just, I'll kill you. And nobody was going to put a stop to it. My brother finally came and put a stop to it. And, my sister sat there and just watched the whole thing. Yeah, and it's just like, I thought about that. And I kind of held a grudge against her for a long time because of that. And I thought, why would she not step in and say something? I know if it was me, I would have said, I wouldn't have cared if I got beaten. I would have been like, you know what, don't hurt my sister like that. Because I used to stand up for my brothers. When my dad was abusing my brothers, I'd be like, don't hurt my brothers. Of course, I'd be beaten on too for saying that. But I would stand up and say it. So see, I've never been afraid to say what I think is right. You know what I mean? Regardless of the situation and regardless of the consequences, because it's just incredibly wrong. And so, yeah, my family was very dysfunctional. Nobody came together. You know what I mean? Like, the siblings were not a team. The parents were not a team. We were all on our own in this home of hell. You know what I mean? So it's harsh what people will do, passing on that cycle of abuse. My parents both were abused, and they knew better. And my dad's excuse is that it was the devil that made him do it. And also that it was the 1960s. He likes to throw that in there too. But he was abusing his children in the 1950s, and he was also abusing his children in the late 1940s, and his wife. So he can't use the 60s as an excuse. He tries to use that as an excuse. I'm like, Dad, come on. You were a bad man. Yeah, so that's the issue, You can't, we cannot go on and carry on these behaviors. So that's what he's saying here. You know what I mean? We have to learn to change these behaviors. So if we were abused as children, it does not give us the right to go out and abuse our own children or any other children or anybody else. It's a cycle of abuse. So if we didn't like what other people did to us, or our parents or whoever abused us, then we have to keep our own behavior in check. You know what I mean? Because it does not give you a right to treat people the way that you were treated. That's a cycle of abuse, and that's what needs to be stopped, right? So it's a huge issue, and I had to go back and relearn a whole lot of stuff, regarding my own behavior, because I had an extremely violent nature, So I had to, especially did a lot of work on that in my 30s, So it took me a long time to kind of stop my behaviors, So Have a great day, everybody. I'll be back on tonight, Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, as well as my show here at 10 o'clock p.m. Standard Time, if you're interested in tuning into that one. So otherwise, I'll see you guys Thursday morning, same time, same place. And you'll take good care of yourself. Thanks for being here with me this morning. I had Chris and Storm Pacer and some other people here. Thanks very much for tuning in and being here. And have a great day, everybody. We'll catch you at another time. And I just wish you all the best. If you can't cope, you make sure to call a crisis line, but you get some help, If you're a survivor and you're having a hard time, you reach out to somebody, but you make sure that you stick around and get some help, Don't suffer in silence and on your own. Make sure you get some help. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.